You stand at the crossroads again. Another choice. Another moment where you tell yourself you need more time, more information, more certainty. But that's a lie. You're not waiting for clarity. You're waiting for someone else to make the choice for you. Søren Kierkegaard understood something most people spend their entire lives avoiding. The thing that paralyzes you isn't the lack of options. It's the weight of choosing one. Because when you choose, you become responsible. And responsibility is the one burden you've been trained to fear more than failure itself. Let me show you what's really happening. You're scrolling through your phone at 2 a.m. You've got 3 job offers on the table, 2 potential relationships brewing, a business idea that won't leave you alone, and you're frozen. Not because the options are equal, but because choosing one means killing the others. It means closing doors. It means standing in the identity you create through that choice. Kierkegaard called this the dizziness of freedom, the vertigo you feel when you realize that you and you alone must author your life. No algorithm can do it. No guru can do it. No amount of research will remove the fundamental terror of commitment. Here's what society did to you. From the moment you could speak, you were fed a myth. The myth that the right choice exists somewhere out there, waiting to be discovered. Like a treasure chest buried in the sand. All you need to do is dig long enough, read enough reviews, compare enough options, and then magically the correct path will reveal itself. So you became an archaeologist of your own life, excavating every possibility, weighing every variable, building spreadsheets for decisions that require courage, not calculation. But here's the truth Kierkegaard knew. There is no right choice waiting to be found. There's only the choice you make and the person you become by making it. Think about the last major decision you avoided, the relationship you didn't commit to, the career pivot you postponed, the conversation you've been rehearsing for months. You told yourself you were being thoughtful, strategic, rational. But strip away the justifications, and what's left? Fear. Not fear of making the wrong choice. Fear of making any choice at all, because once you choose, the fantasy dies. Let me explain the fantasy. Right now, in your state of indecision, all paths remain open. You could still be the entrepreneur who builds an empire, the artist who creates something timeless, the partner who finds perfect love, the traveler who discovers themselves on some distant mountain. In potentiality, you are everything. In actuality, you are nothing. And here's the secret you've been protecting. You prefer the comfort of infinite potential to the risk of finite reality. Because potential can't fail. Potential can't disappoint. Potential keeps you safe from the one thing you fear most, being seen for who you actually are when you finally commit to something. Kierkegaard described 3 stages of existence. Most people never make it past the first, the aesthetic stage. This is where you live in possibility, sampling experiences, keeping your options open, treating life like a buffet where you can always go back for more. The aesthetic person is the eternal browser, swiping through lives they'll never live, bookmarking articles they'll never read, starting projects they'll never finish. They mistake motion for progress, exploration for growth, but they're running in place, and somewhere deep down, they know it. You felt it, haven't you? That hollowness, the Sunday night dread that no amount of productivity content can fix, the growing suspicion that you're wasting your life in the waiting room of your own existence. Kierkegaard saw this despair as a gift, not a problem to solve, but a signal to heed. Despair is what happens when you refuse to become who you are, when you choose not to choose, when you abandon the self you could be for the comfort of remaining undefined. Here's what no one tells you about indecision. It's not passive. It's an active choice to remain in limbo. Every day you delay is a day you choose the safety of non-commitment over the danger of living. And that choice has consequences. real, measurable, accumulating consequences. While you're weighing options, time is making the choice for you. That business opportunity closes. That person finds someone willing to commit. That version of yourself you could have become fades a little more into impossibility. Indecision isn't neutral territory. It's a slow burial. Let me tell you about the man Kierkegaard watched destroy himself. A friend of his, brilliant and talented, every path open to him. He spent years deliberating between careers, between loves, between identities. He wanted to make the perfect choice, the one that would justify all the waiting. But perfection never came. And by the time he finally chose, half his life was gone, not to living, but to preparing to live. He had become a spectator in his own existence, watching others build lives while he perfected his blueprint. Kierkegaard wrote about him with a kind of horrified pity, because he saw the same tendency in himself, the same intellectual escape hatch, the same temptation to think rather than be. This is the trap of the intelligent person. You can always think of one more angle, one more perspective, one more reason to wait. Your mind becomes a prison of infinite recursion, thinking about thinking, until you're so far removed from action that you've convinced yourself paralysis is wisdom. But wisdom isn't the absence of error. It's the willingness to err in the direction of something real. Here's the second stage Kierkegaard described, the ethical stage. This is where you finally choose, not perfectly, not with complete certainty, but with conviction. You commit to a path, a partner, a set of principles. You accept that this choice will exclude other possibilities, and you do it anyway, because you understand that a life of meaningful commitment beats a life of meaningless potential. This is where most people stumble, because commitment feels like death. And in a way, it is. It's the death of who you could have been. The burial of all those alternate timelines you've been nursing in your imagination. But it's also birth, the birth of who you actually are. Think about the people you respect most, the ones who've built something, created something, become something. What do they have in common? Not talent, not luck, not perfect decision-making, conviction. They chose a direction and walked it. They committed to a craft and practiced it. They picked a person and fought for them. They didn't wait for the stars to align. They aligned themselves and moved forward. And yes, some of their choices were wrong. Some of their paths led nowhere. But even their failures were real, tangible, instructive, better than your pristine theoretical perfection. Here's what happens when you finally commit. At first, panic. Your mind will throw every doubt at you. Every path not taken will suddenly look like the path you should have taken. This is normal. This is your psyche grieving the loss of infinite possibility. Let it grieve. Then something shifts. You stop comparing. You stop second-guessing. You start building. And in the building you discover something Kierkegaard promised. The self is not found. It's forged. Every committed action is a hammer strike, shaping you into someone specific, someone real, someone who exists beyond the realm of potential. But there's a deeper level here. Kierkegaard's third stage, the religious stage. And before you tune out, this isn't about doctrine. It's about something more fundamental. The willingness to commit to something beyond yourself. To leap beyond what can be rationalized or proven, to stand in a conviction so deep that it defines you even when it can't be defended by logic alone. This is where real power lives, not in weighing options, but in subordinating yourself to a mission, a calling, a truth that chose you. Think about the people who changed history. They weren't the ones with the most information. They were the ones with the deepest conviction. They bet everything on an idea that couldn't be proven in advance. And that's what terrifies you. You want guarantees. You want to know it'll work before you commit. You want the map before you take the journey. But life doesn't work that way. The map is drawn by walking. The guarantee comes from the commitment, not before it. Kierkegaard wrote about the leap of faith, not as a religious concept, but as the fundamental human act. The moment you stop calculating and start living, the moment you choose yourself into existence. This leap is what separates those who live from those who merely survive. Let's get practical, because philosophy means nothing if it doesn't change how you move tomorrow. You have a decision in front of you right now, maybe several. The relationship you're lukewarm about, the career you're tolerating, the city you're staying in out of inertia. Stop researching, stop polling your friends, stop waiting for the universe to send you a sign. Here's your sign. You already know what you need to do. Buried under the layers of rationalization and fear, there's a knowing, a quiet voice that's been trying to tell you for months, maybe years. You've just been drowning it out with analysis. Ask yourself this. If you knew you couldn't fail, what would you choose? Now ask the real question. What if failure isn't the thing to fear? What if the thing to fear is reaching the end of your life having never committed to anything deeply enough to fail at it spectacularly? What if safety is the real danger? Kierkegaard spent his life wrestling with this. He broke off his engagement to the woman he loved, not because he didn't love her, but because he couldn't commit to being the man she deserved. He knew his calling would consume him, and he made a choice, a devastating one, but a real one. He didn't hedge. He didn't keep her on the back burner. He cut clean and lived with the consequences. Was it the right choice? He spent the rest of his life wondering, but it was his choice, and it made him who he was. This is what you're avoiding: the irreversibility of commitment, the permanence of consequence, the knowledge that you can't go back and unlive what you've lived. But that's exactly what makes it meaningful. A choice without consequence isn't a choice. It's a simulation, and you've been living in simulation mode for too long. Here's the truth about conviction. It doesn't come before the choice. It comes after. You don't wait to feel certain. You choose, and certainty follows, or it doesn't, and you adjust. But you do it as someone who acts, not someone who waits. Think of conviction as a muscle. Right now, yours is atrophied. You've spent so long avoiding decisive action that you've forgotten how it feels to stand in a choice. The first few will feel wrong, shaky, uncertain. That's fine. You're rebuilding strength. Start small if you need to. Choose what to eat without deliberating. Choose which project to work on without hedging. Choose who to spend time with without keeping backup plans. Each small commitment is a rep, building the capacity to make the big ones. Let me tell you what happens when you don't do this. When you continue to drift in indecision, you wake up at 45. You've got a decent job you stumbled into, a relationship you settled for, a life built by default instead of design. And the worst part isn't the mediocrity, it's the knowing that you had chances, moments where you could have chosen differently. But you waited, and waiting became your choice. The choice to not choose, the choice to let circumstances decide for you. And now you're living someone else's life. A life assembled from the expectations of others, the path of least resistance, the safety of conformity. And you can't even blame anyone, because you did this through 1,000 small acts of cowardice disguised as prudence. Kierkegaard wrote that purity of heart is to will one thing, not to want one thing, not to prefer one thing, to will it with everything you are. This is what you're running from: the totality of commitment, the burning of ships, the point of no return, because as long as you keep your options open, you keep your excuses ready. I could have been great, but I would have succeeded if only. Your potential remains intact, safely preserved in amber, never tested, never proven, never real. But here's what happens when you finally commit. When you choose one path and walk it with everything you have, you might fail, probably will in some ways, but you'll fail as yourself, not as a committee, not as a hedge, as a singular committed force. And even in failure, there's dignity in that, there's learning in that, there's growth in that, because you actually did something, you actually were someone.
The people who haunt themselves aren't the ones who tried and failed. They're the ones who never tried, who spent their lives in the waiting room, preparing, optimizing, planning, never launching. Don't be one of them.
Let me tell you something else Kierkegaard understood, the paradox of choice in the modern age. He lived in the 1800s, but he saw it coming. This explosion of options, this multiplication of paths, this tyranny of endless possibility. In his time, most people's lives were determined by birth. You were born a farmer, you died a farmer. You were born in a village, you died in that village. The path was narrow, but it was clear. Today, you have infinite paths, and you mistake this for freedom. But freedom without commitment is just another prison, a prison where the bars are made of possibility itself. You scroll through social media and see 1,000 different lives, the digital nomad in Bali, the startup founder raising millions, the fitness influencer with the perfect body, the minimalist living in a van, the family man with the white picket fence, and each one whispers to you, this could be you. So you keep all the doors open. You dabble in this, experiment with that. You're a jack of all trades, master of none. Not because you lack talent, but because you lack the courage to close doors, to say, this is my path, and these other paths are not. Kierkegaard would tell you that this abundance is a curse disguised as a blessing, because the more options you have, the harder it becomes to choose, and the harder it becomes to choose, the more you suffer. This is why your grandfather with fewer options was probably happier than you. Not because his life was easier, but because his choices were clearer. He didn't have to become himself. He just had to be what he was born to be. You have to create yourself from scratch, and that's terrifying. But here's the gift hidden in that terror. You get to choose. Really choose. Not just accept what's handed to you, not just follow the script, but authoring your own existence. That's the opportunity, and it's also the responsibility you're running from. Because with that power comes the weight of accountability. You can't blame your parents. You can't blame society. You can't blame the economy or the algorithm or bad luck. You chose this. Or you chose not to choose, which is still a choice. Either way, it's on you. And maybe that's why you're here, watching this, looking for permission, looking for a sign, looking for someone to tell you it's okay to finally commit. So here it is. It's okay. But here's the gift hidden in that terror. You get to choose, really choose. Not just accept what's handed to you, not just follow the script, but authoring your own existence. That's the opportunity, and it's also the responsibility you're running from. Because with that power comes the weight of accountability. You can't blame your parents. You can't blame society. You can't blame the economy or the algorithm or bad luck. You chose this, or you chose not to choose, which is still a choice. Either way, it's on you. And maybe that's why you're here, watching this, looking for permission, looking for a sign, looking for someone to tell you it's okay to finally commit. So here it is. It's okay. More than okay. It's necessary. You've been in the waiting room long enough. Think about what commitment actually gives you. Not just the obvious things, but the hidden gifts. When you commit to one path, you gain depth. The dilettante knows a little about everything. The committed person knows everything about something. And in that depth, you find mastery, you find meaning, You find the kind of satisfaction that surface-level sampling can never provide. When you commit to one person, you gain intimacy. The person who keeps their options open never experiences true vulnerability, never experiences being fully known, never experiences the profound connection that comes from choosing someone and being chosen in return. When you commit to one mission, you gain impact. The person scattered across 10 projects accomplishes nothing significant. The person devoted to one thing changes the world, or at least changes their corner of it. Kierkegaard knew this. He committed to his work with a ferocity that bordered on obsession. He wrote like a man possessed, produced more in his short life than most people produce in twice the time, not because he was more talented, but because he was more committed. He chose his path and walked it without looking back. And yes, he paid a price. His health suffered. His relationships suffered. His reputation in his own time suffered. But he created something that outlasted all of that. Something that still speaks to us nearly 2 centuries later. That's the power of committed action. It transcends the moment. It builds something that lasts. But you don't have to change the world. You just have to change your world. To stop drifting and start directing. To stop waiting and start walking. To stop theorizing and start testing. The life you want is on the other side of commitment. Not commitment to the perfect choice, but commitment to any real choice. Because any committed path is better than wandering. Any chosen identity is better than remaining undefined. Any real failure is better than theoretical success. Here's your homework, not metaphorical, actual homework. Before the week ends, make one irreversible choice, something you've been postponing, something that scares you, because once you do it, you can't undo it. Send that message, book that flight, have that conversation, quit that thing you've been tolerating, start that thing you've been planning. Make it real, make it yours. And when the doubt comes, and it will come, don't run from it, sit with it. Let it pass through you, and keep moving. Because conviction isn't the absence of doubt, it's action in the presence of it. Kierkegaard died at 42, young by any measure. But he lived more in those 42 years than most people live in 80, because he committed to his writing, to his ideas, to his truth, however unpopular. He didn't wait for permission. He didn't wait for perfect conditions. He didn't wait to feel ready. He chose himself into existence. And 200 years later, we're still reading his words, still wrestling with his questions, still confronting the same truths he confronted. That's the power of commitment. It outlives you. But forget legacy. Forget posterity. Think about tomorrow. Think about waking up as someone who chose, someone who stood in their conviction, even if it shook, someone who stopped hiding in analysis and started living in action. How would that feel? How would you move through the world? What would become possible? You know what you need to do. You've known for a while. The question isn't what, it's when. And the answer to when is always now. Not when you feel ready. Not when the conditions improve. Not when you have more information. Now, while you're still afraid, while you still doubt, while you can still fail, that's when real life begins. Stop researching your life. Stop optimizing your choices. Stop waiting for someone to give you permission to become who you already are. Choose, commit, live, or spend the rest of your life explaining why you didn't. The choice, as always, is yours. But understand this, not choosing is still a choice, and it's the one you'll regret most. Kierkegaard was right. You're not indecisive. You're afraid of your own conviction, afraid of what happens when you stop being everyone and become someone. But that fear is a compass. It points toward the life you're meant to live, the person you're meant to become. Follow it, not away from the fear, but through it. That's where you'll find yourself, not in some future moment of clarity, but in the crucible of committed action, right here, Right now, this is your life. Stop waiting for it to begin.